Hey, how's it
Hey,
going?
going well. How are you?
Going well. This is our first time to see each other.
Yeah, it
Good to
is.
see you,
Aside
man.
from pictures here and there.
Yeah, I guess yeah. There's some pictures on Facebook we've seen. What? Yeah. So right before I hit record here,
Mhm.
I was just confirming that we were okay with using the name Prog Knobs,
Yeah.
and you started saying something about it.
Yeah, so the name Prog Knobs is fine to me. I like it. I like it better than what came to mind, which was progtology. And but that's just for one, it's a gross pun, and two, it was already a song title by the band Enchant. So I feel like I can't use it.
And well, that's no, you're already surpassing me. I don't know anything about the band Enchant. So is that like a neo prog band or something?
Kind of sort of. They were early 90s. They started in the early 90s.
Okay.
They were on the Magna Carta record label, if you're familiar
Okay.
with
I
that.
remember
So
that.
they're
Yeah. No, I remember hearing about that label.
yeah, so they sounded their sound is pretty easy to describe, at least back when they started on their first few albums. Very much, in Kansas and Rush, and I would say Marillion a bit.
Okay.
Mhm.
Sounds pretty neo
So
prog.
yeah, they did an instrumental. They did two instrumentals. One was called, I forget what the first one was called, but then the second one later on was called Progtology.
Wow.
So you could just
Yeah.
throw, it's an instrumental. You could throw
Right.
out a goofy
Yeah.
title if you
Just like
want, even if you're
chan
an otherwise not a humorous band.
yeah, channeling the image of sticking a finger up your ass, with the uh
Um,
the 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 pun or whatever,
yeah,
progtology,
yeah.
proctology.
It's one of those things where it's like, see, we do have a sense of humor after all. You can't accuse us of not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. At least they're doing that. I mean, it seems like a lot of neo prog bands like took themselves more seriously than, a lot of the artists that were, they were channeling. I don't know. That's kind of my
Mhm.
my opinion of that. But
It's
maybe we're
funny, yeah,
jumping ahead.
when you read about the makings of some albums, a lot of bands like Universe Zero is one where they have to say like, we swear we were having a lot of fun while doing this, even though it doesn't sound like it is.
Yeah, no, that's good. But we're jumping ahead, I guess. I mean,
A little.
we should,
Mhm.
since this is our first, thing, and we actually just talked. Okay, so you're James and I'm Nathan, just to let you know in case you didn't know that.
Hello.
Hi. No, uh, and we've been Facebook friends for quite a while. And I don't know, I just something about I like the we've interacted a lot on posts and stuff, and I
Mhm.
thought that I know, I just thought like, hey, this guy's a good sport. I bet it'd be fun to just talk about Prague and just kind of see where it goes, because we're
Yeah.
obviously both have some interest in it. And so we talked on the phone for the first time, heard each other's voices for the first time last week, and then yeah, so now we're doing it. But I just kind of thought that we had there was like a certain amount of overlapping in our interests, but also and like similar experience. At least it seems like we can get into that or whatever. But
Mhm.
also, it seems like we have enough differences, to make it interesting, and or whatever. But
Yeah, I would say so.
you had but you jotted down. You kind of had an idea of what you wanted to, what you thought we might do. What were you
Mhm.
thinking?
One of the things I figured we should talk about, because everybody has a good story about how they get into Prague. I mean, it's not something that most fans grow up listening to right away. Because how
Yeah.
could you? You're not gonna. You're probably didn't hear it on the radio a whole heck of a lot,
Yeah.
and if you did, it might not. You might not have known what it was. Like, everybody heard Yes is "Seen All Good People" if they're listening to radio stations that played '70s music,
Yeah,
but it
or
probably didn't
roundabout
really
or
stand
whatever.
out as much of anything different, right? Um, I mean, you're not going to hear Close to the Edge on the radio unless somebody's like midnight programs playing it. Um, so talking about how we get into Prague is really part of the fun.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to
So,
have
so
like a dad that just like pushed it on you as a kid or something, and
that's
to
probably
claim to
one way
have
that
like
that probably
original.
happens a lot. that could have the opposite effect too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like the kid just turns into like,
Like,
just wants to
my
be in a
dad was
punk
a
band
piston.
or
I'll listen to anything else.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So what's your story then?
Well, one of the important factors was as a kid growing up, I mean, I was born in 1981, so I grew up as a kid with 80s music,
Mm,
and I would say I like most things about it. Um, not the softer stuff, but like synth pop, hair metal, and hard rock. I enjoyed it a lot, and I knew I enjoyed drums the most. And the big drum sets, I like those. My parents had cable TV. I guess starting in the mid '80s, they got cable TV, and so I was watching MTV a lot. Um, and one of my favorite radio stations at the end of the '80s changed formats to country, and I was devastated.
which one is it? Because we grew up in the Dallas Fort Worth area, right? Or did you grow up
I
somewhere
grew up.
else?
I was in the Houston area at the time,
Oh,
actually.
okay, okay.
So it was a station called for anybody who know, it was 93Q. And I think they still exist as a country station, but
Hmm.
93Q played like 80s pop and rock, and then they switched over to country without like much notice to me at all. Like it was just the one day they were one thing and the next day they were another. And
Hmm.
so I didn't want to listen to that. I had to find something else. So I found a station. It was 101 KLOL, and they played a mix of some current rock, but classic rock as well. So I was hearing some old stuff that I hadn't really been exposed to much before, which included some bands that would touch on prog and some classic rock. And then fast forward a little bit, I'm at age 11. I remember recording all sorts of stuff off the radio on blank tapes. You
Hmm.
might have done that too.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh, um, I did really like some songs by Rush at the time. I think most of the ones I liked were probably from Roll the Bones, which is not really a prog album,
Huh. Yeah.
but that's what started getting me into Rush. I heard those, I liked them. It was something a little different, and also Led Zeppelin's "The Ocean" was kind of a pivotal song because I couldn't count to it.
Huh.
There's a dropped beat in there, and
Yeah.
I was kind of blown away. I was like, wait, what's happening here? I got to figure this out. So I'm sitting there, like sitting like on the floor in front of my radio, trying to tap along to the song, and it was something would reset in my brain, and I would go along with how the beat was dropped, and I couldn't figure it out. So I know that moment I was attracted to odd time signatures because of that.
Hmm.
That song really
Yeah.
piqued my interest there. But yeah, and that's how I got into Rush too, is just recording it off the radio onto those blank tapes. Um, didn't really buy albums yet until a little bit later. I was kind of annoyed with some of the popular alternative rock songs at the time. It was just getting on my nerves a little bit. That wasn't my favorite.
You talking about like the grunge stuff or
Some of it I liked. In particular, I think it was Blind Melon's "No Rain" just rubbed
oh,
me the way,
yeah.
and which is kind of ironic because other Blind
Some
Melon
spin
songs
doctors maybe?
turns out I really like, but "No Rain" just was so overplayed, and I didn't really like it, and started looking for a way out, and went back to some of those. Started looking at Rush CDs, thinking like, oh, what were those songs that I liked so much back in like 1992? This was 94 by then, and so that's what kind of set things off. Was just um, looking for whatever those songs were on.
Yeah.
So I got into Roll the Bones, bought Signals, and I bought a couple of Pink Floyd albums as well because I like them. Um, Blockbuster Music was a new store at the time, so I was always bringing up stacks of CDs to the counter to listen to them before I bought them,
Yeah.
and things kind of just snowballed from there a bit. So that's the main backstory. Is that once the interest in Rush was really cemented in, um, I just kept looking for new things, and that were somehow similar or related to that moment, and things just branched off from there forever.
Yeah, I think Rush is, I mean, obviously this has probably been said a million times, but they're kind of I mean, obviously, I think they're a very uh, common and solid gateway band to Prague, or I think it's kind of like a crossroads. It's like, um, because I guess they're prog, but they fall into they seem to just to like lean more. I mean, they're put more in a classic rock category,
Yeah, a lot of
in a
people
way.
saw them as the hard rock or heavy metal type group, which is totally fine. I think it probably just depends on like how were you first exposed to them? Like maybe if you
Right.
saw them in the late 70s opening for Kiss or something, you're like, that was a really great heavy metal group. Um,
Yeah.
but, me, the song that I first loved was Ghost of a Chance, which is far removed from hard rock and heavy metal.
Hmm.
Um, I never thought of them as that. I didn't even know, I wouldn't know what they were. I mean, Geddy Lee's voice was just one of a kind.
Yeah.
So I had no
I
clue
think
what they were.
that it's like they either define, which direction you go, like for the classic rock crowd, I think that
Mhm.
they're like the limit of what they'll take. You know what I mean? It's like they're like at the outer limits. But then,
Yeah, yeah.
then for some people who are, listening to classic rock, radio stations and the hear rush, then it's like that's a door that they open up to go to, deeper into Prague.
Hmm.
And they're like, okay, well, I like the classic rock stuff. Now I like this other stuff. This is a little more exciting. This is getting my, teenage testosterone pumping and, tickling my odd meter and unusual song structure bone, that I didn't know I had.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's, I guess for my deal or entry. I mean, I guess I was thinking about it because you mentioned kind of what you were thinking of us talking about, and I mean,
Hmm.
my first memory of, and we want to talk about fusion as well, right?
You're right. Uh-huh.
We're kind of
That
talking
came
about
up a
prog
lot
and
later for
fusion.
me.
The first thing in that category that I where when I think back in hindsight that I remember seeing was in the late 70s. My dad had like this really sad stack of vinyl records, or whatever. I mean, I don't know. It was pretty small.
Yeah.
It was about that thick in a milk crate or something next to the Marantz stereo. Um, and it was just kind of like an eclectic thing. He was a band instructor, or he taught. He was like a band director in colleges and stuff, and so he would get
Mhm.
like sample um, records of like things for marching band, just like demo records and stuff
Okay.
like
Yeah.
that, that I guess he was sent just to like, hey, do you want your band to play this year? So I remember a lot, playing those kind of things, and it was like, so I actually heard, like a lot of songs that I heard of the day and like theme songs from TV shows were more like marching band versions of those than
Oh, how
so
interesting. Yeah.
like I heard the Starsky and Hutch theme done by a marching band, and then then I ended up seeing the TV show, and I was like, wait, what's going on here? Like, oh, okay. Well, and
Yeah.
somehow I always liked the marching band versions better. But anyway,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. In the stack was like Return to Forever Live.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I remember
Well,
putting it on and not really getting it, or just kind of not. I mean, I remember thinking it was kind of interesting, but it wasn't one of the ones that I would just sit around and try to play. Um,
mhm.
but that's the first, when I think of like what's the first thing that's considered prog or fusion that I can remember in my life. Of course I
Mhm.
didn't know it was that back then, but just looking back, the next thing that along the same lines is just that I can remember where I look back, it was the 90125 Yes album,
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
hearing those songs or seeing the music videos like for Leave It and Owner of a Lonely Heart and Change
Mhm.
stuff. That I really, like I thought that stuff was really cool, as a kid.
Yeah.
And um I guess that was kind of like a footnote or whatever. I didn't
Mhm.
know that they'd have more stuff, and I really wasn't. My parents were not into classic rock. They were just kind of like uh orchestra nerds. They were just both into classical music, and so
Mhm.
they weren't really listening to any rock stations or anything like that. So anything I heard
Yeah.
was like on through friends or at their house or whatever. And then, I just kind of like, had like a general, like 80s uh, song interest, music interest.
Hmm.
I actually found you said you didn't like the lighter stuff. I found myself connecting more with like um, the pop um, synth stuff more than the like synth pop stuff. Like, okay, so like and this kind of relates to Prague a little bit to me
Yeah.
because, when I look back at it, the stuff I liked that was kind of like synth pop was um, people from the 70s that were trying to, move into the 80s with
Hmm.
synthesizers and drum machines. So you
Yeah.
have like these people who were like, you know, who were doing prog or, like in some form, they were trying to do prog in the
Hmm.
70s, whether it be like Toto, I guess Toto, they were kind of,
They could have been a great prog band if they
well,
really wanted to.
they're,
I mean,
they're,
you could
I
always
mean,
hear those moments.
I guess that they're kind of the first wave of bands that I mean, like, because obviously, when you watch interviews with them, they're all into like, oh yeah, we went to go see, they were into Yes and
Hmm.
Genesis. I mean, they were all into Prague, but
Yeah,
they
yeah.
just when they started getting into music, things were changing, and that was right when things were changing to where Prague was not, as marketable, and record companies were kind of stopped not investing in that so much. So
Hmm.
they just went to the West Coast jazz sound, which to me is
Yeah.
totally, just like bubbling at the frog bubbling at the surface. It's like they're trying to sneak that and stuff. Jay Grade
Hmm.
and the Toto guys, and Dave Grusin, all, I mean all that's Lee Ritenour, I mean all that kind of stuff. I mean, I love that stuff. I love that soft stuff where they're just like trying to do like just like little spicy little uh things. I guess maybe you could call it. I don't know if it's like totally. I guess it's yacht rock. I mean, but anyway. So in the '80s, like
I like
that's the
that
kind
too, though. That's kind of like the stuff that's like you can't just outright call it prog rock. But at the same time, you're like, but they were able to, yeah, they were able to sneak it in there. You listen to something like, is it "Girl Goodbye"?
yeah,
Um, that song wouldn't have been what it was with if they weren't into some prog rock in the first place. And like
yeah,
the keyboard solos on Rosanna, I mean, that's
yeah.
straight out of a prog rock album, but it's in such a smooth pop song.
Right.
It's
Well,
really
they're
a
trying.
kind
It's
of
like
cool combination of those things.
yeah, they're doing what they can. It's like they recognize like, hey, we've got to make a living. But we're just gonna like challenge, pop to limits that we can,
Hmm.
to what it'll work. But I mean, at heart, all those guys are just like totally prog. I mean, I'm just saying they have a prog heart. I mean, if you could say that
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. They
No,
just
that's fair.
that's what they came up on. That's what the concerts they were freaking out about when they were younger, right before they got into music and stuff. I mean, that's where they're coming from. And so, to me, I mean, like my favorite, like at move, over the years, the stuff that I like best about Prague, I mean, and this again, this may be jumping forward, just kind of getting sidetracked, but my favorite Prague era is like the very late '70s, maybe early '80s.
Hmm.
Just the stuff I like it when like Genesis Duke. That's my favorite Genesis album.
Hmm. Yeah,
UK. Um,
yeah.
I especially love Danger Money and Live. I mean, I like the first one though, a lot. But
Yeah.
just that
I
thing where
probably
it's
listened
like
to the
they're
live
trying to.
album more than any of it.
What's that?
Especially they did a two CD reissue of the live album, so you could hear the whole concert now,
Oh,
which
really?
is kind of
Actually,
a
I haven't
nice
even heard
treat.
that.
Oh,
It's
it's really great. All the songs that you thought like, well, why didn't they play these super awesome long songs that were on
wow.
Danger Money? I forget some of the titles. It's like Anything She Does. Is that
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yep.
Anyway, you're like, that's a highlight. Why isn't it on the live album? That seems blasphemous. Well, they did play it, and it's on the whole two CD package, which is kind of nice. It was remixed, which is it's kind of a trade off, I would say.
Oh, okay. I see. Is it like a
Um,
Steven Wilson remix or something? I don't know.
I think it was Bob Clearmountain.
Okay, cool.
but it's interesting because it's very different. It's kind of like so the drums are like semi-pan right and someone else is semi-pan left, and it sounds like it was more live. The vocals aren't quite as upfront. Um, but anyway, it's nice to have the rest of the songs, you
Yeah.
know, stuff that you know would have been there, but somehow that just wasn't on a single LP live album. That's the danger with single LP live albums. You know, they can't give
Yeah.
you enough.
Yeah, they just, got to pick what they think is the best, going to work at the time. But
Mhm.
yeah, so, just like that, that's kind of like, I mean, like now where I'm at now, that's kind of like that's my favorite, era of Prague. It's just where it's like,
Mhm.
they're like getting scared and they're like, I mean, and who knows what the psychology is. I mean, I just imagine that
Yeah.
it's like, there's blood in the water and, so you've got to start doing just the just like the pops, embarrassing pop, you know, uh,
Hmm.
shifting chord stuff and modulation, just where it's not
Yeah.
so like Baroque sounding or whatever, and more
Hmm.
um well, okay, so and then like yes, my favorite album by there is just Drama. I love
Okay.
Drama.
Yeah. I
That's
really
really
like
the only
drama
one I
too.
want to list. I mean, it's like I appreciate and enjoy their whole, 70s discography and everything,
Hmm.
but just some, like it's just like I guess you just like get older and you just like, well, what will I still listen to by this band, and
Hmm.
that's that's the one, I keep that CD in my car, it's just man,
Hmm.
it just seems similar to me with and I made a Facebook post, maybe you commented on it at one point, but the
Yeah.
DS album and Drama remind me a lot of each other in that it just seems like
Hmm.
they got kind of like a reinvigorated, or just like they kind of just like figured something out and they have this excitement, just like, hey, we just kind of stumble on a new direction, or just
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
kind of mutation of our sound. And it's just
Hmm.
like they really seem really excited about it, and it's like really crunchy. The production is, I guess that
Drama
was the
sounds really great. I'll listen to it even if I don't feel like it, just because I'm like, they had really good sound on that. Just like
yeah,
the drums and keyboards, just are really good.
man,
Um,
yeah,
as
but
opposed to Formato, which was very weak sounding.
yeah. And I guess they went back to Eddie Offord on production, or engineering, which is
Yeah, I think you're right.
uh, which is interesting because the S album was, I guess that was the first one that he produced of theirs.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
um, yeah. Anyway, to me, there's like a similarity, just kind of like because
Hmm.
they just seem kind of like wishy washy. Their first two albums, to me at least, Time and a Word actually seems like it'd be a really cool album. And I'm sure this has been said a million times, but
Hmm.
if it didn't have the orchestra, I mean, it just seems like it would
Oh
be a
yeah.
really cool, crunchy album.
Hmm.
Um, but that whole orchestra thing just kind of, for me, just throws it off. It'd be nice to hear like a mix of that album without that, just to
Hmm.
see what it'd be like.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. Anyway, so I just had, yeah, so like yes, and then I just kind of got into like 80s pop that was more like, so obviously like um Mr. For example, Richard Page,
Right.
the guy,
Hmm.
who before that was in Pages, which is like just total fusion West Coast. It's like
Oh, okay.
most of the West Coast jazz. Have you ever listened to any Pages stuff?
I haven't
Man, you probably like, yeah,
listened to
like
Mr. but I haven't listened to Pages.
yeah, so he was like Richard Page was like a backup singer on like he was just like a Toto guy. I mean, just like on everybody's
Mhm.
album back then. Just
Oh, okay.
he's a background singer and also like a co-writer. I think he like co-wrote a lot of songs. But
Yeah.
yeah, he was. I saw some recent thing where they were getting back together. With Pat Mastelotto and um uh I think that they had an
I'd
album.
help you out, but I don't know the names of anybody else in the group.
No, no, no. I know their names. Like Steve, not Steve George, Steve Ferris. Man, I love
Okay.
Steve Ferris's guitar playing. It's like you listen to that album, Welcome to the Real World,
Hmm.
and it's just like it just seems like he doesn't. Everything is just like. effects or so, I mean, not like um, like pedal guitar effects. It's just like just like him playing, just like sound effects or something with his, with his
Yeah,
playing and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I mean, it's just like a lot of it just seems to tie everything together. I mean, there obviously is some rhythm playing and melodic stuff, but I
Mhm.
just think he's one of the coolest guitar players to me.
I
But
think that might be one of those bands where, similar to Rush in the '80s, where they're always it's always a challenge of how does the guitar interact with a band that has keyboards in it.
mhm,
So you have to find your place in a unique way that maybe you didn't have to before. Um,
yeah,
so that leads to the sort of textural playing, maybe different tones,
textural.
and
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
mhm, yeah,
Like he does a lot of things where it's with the whammy bar, where he's just, but it's like, it's like maybe he pulls it up,
mhm,
and it's like it helps like slide into the next part or something. It's like there's a
yeah,
change coming in the song, and
mhm,
he's like, "Ew," then he like lands on a chord,
yeah, yeah,
so it's real tasteful stuff, I think. But
mhm,
anyway, yeah, so I mean, those are total prog guys. But then I got into metal at some point.
mhm,
Just discovered Black Sabbath. When I was like, whatever, 14 or something, and
mhm,
13 or 14, and got real into them, and then just started hearing dudes in school talk about Anthrax, and this is like
yeah.
mid to late 80s.
Oh, okay.
Guys talking about Anthrax and Slayer and Testament and all that stuff. So I just went down a whole. I had a friend who was just like had all that shit, and so I just made tape dubs of all those out Megadeth, and just like so was just got into that whole thing, and
Yeah.
then was in that mode, and somewhere in the late 80s, it might have been 89 or 9, maybe around 90. Um, I was in Forever Young Records.
Mhm,
You ever been to Forever
yeah.
Young?
Yep,
And
I'm, real
well, it was
familiar.
in Arlington at the time. Is it still Arlington, or is it Grand Prairie that it's in that
It's
building?
in Grand Prairie, I guess just because it's on the, east side of 360.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah, it's
it used
Grand
to be
Prairie.
on Pioneer Parkway,
Oh,
right at
okay.
like Cooper and Pioneer.
Oh, wow, huh.
Yeah,
I didn't know
that's where
they
it
were
was
ever in a
for
different
like.
location from where they were.
Yeah, I know for decades it was. I guess since maybe the '70s or something, it was there, and
Oh,
then
okay.
then they moved in the '90s to the Grand Prairie location. But
Yeah.
I was there just like looking for metal cassettes, and
Mhm.
you know and I'm just like kind of like thumbing through the M's, maybe like, am I gonna find a Megadeth or Metallica, or something, and I hear
Yeah.
and I hear and I'm just like, what is that? And then like and then like it just like starts getting louder and louder, and then
Yeah.
then it's just like crazy dissonant guitars, and then just everything's just going nuts, and there's sound effects and everything, and so I go up
Uh-huh.
to the register, and I'm like, ask the guy, I'm like, what are you playing? And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is King Crimson, Lark's Tongues and Aspic. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, tell me more. And then
Right.
it was this guy Philip who worked there. He's probably dead now, but he uh he got real excited. I was like,
Yeah.
what, 15 or something, and he so basically he showed me um kind of like he was like, okay, I'm going to show this kid a range of stuff.
Mhm.
So he showed me that out, and he was like, I told him, I might buy a couple things. They're kind of pricey. They were like $15 albums in the 1990. you know
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, used, they had like, that's what their used vinyl was. So
Mhm.
I was like, okay, maybe I'll buy like two things or whatever,
Yeah.
and look for some on cassette. The cassettes were 3.98. So yeah, I found like USA, King Crimson, and then he played me Genesis, what Genesis album he played me? I think he played me Nursery Crime.
Okay.
He played Gentle Giant Octopus. Oh, I bought
Yeah.
Octopus. I bought Octopus in USA, and then he played some Weather Report. What Weather Report did he play? I think Mysterious Traveler.
Okay.
And he played me like a Larry Coryell album.
Hmm.
And what else? And maybe a couple other things, but it was just
Yeah.
kind of like a core. So I was like, "Whoa, this is a cool range." So I looked for that stuff, and it was just like, "Bye bye, regular metal." I was just, I was
Yeah.
just hooked. And then and so I in 91, 92, that's when grunge started really breaking. I was really into Soundgarden at the time as well, and
Hmm.
and that I think that's the only band that I just saw Soundgarden as like a little different than the other grunge bands and stuff. So I mean,
Hmm.
I guess I still kind of like listen to them, and they seem
Yeah.
kind of proggy to me, or just like they were doing dissonant stuff, and I mean in a way that
Yeah, and they like odd time signatures too, but that that doesn't really necessarily make it a prog song. But there's like some commonality there, and arrangements and effects were some. There was a lot of variation.
yeah.
Of course, most of the Soundgarden experience I have is probably from Super Unknown or Down on the Upside. So I don't know if those are favorites of yours or not.
No, no,
And it was
actually,
like Louder Than Love, right?
I was just kind of like had some degree of blind loyalty. But for me, like the first thing I got was Louder Than Love. And I keep that in my car. That's like a top 10 album for me. That album
Mhm.
is just, I mean, really, I mean, that's the only Soundgarden album I like.
Oh,
When I
okay.
assess it, looking back, I mean, Super Unknown. There's some stuff I think I feel like they kind of went back to it. Bad Motorfinger just seems like they got too like condensed and tight with their sound or something. I like the sloppiness of Louder Than Love. It's just like it just seemed like just kind of like controlled chaos more.
Yeah.
But then they had the Ultra Mega OK, which I liked, but they didn't even like that. They had like a weird producer that bothered them. Then there's like the Streaming
Okay.
Life FOP EP, which is mid 80s, and that I liked
Yeah.
some stuff off that. But yeah, anyway, just that my friends were just kind of going grunge crazy. And also there was I kind of got like into a little bit of the funk metal. I mean, I dabbled in that for a second, and then I was like,
That's surprising considering what you posted
no,
about
I
it.
know it's because it's like I was like, yeah, that's okay. So and this is a whole other topic, but I feel like there are bands that
Yeah.
just like really, it's like they're designed to tap into teenage boy testosterone, and just like
Uh-huh.
to where it's like you should. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is arguable, but I feel like it's just made to be outgrown or something.
Hmm.
It's made for you to like freak out about it and dork out about, but then
Yeah.
you know once you get past it, you're like, oh my god, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Anyway. But
Right.
so I was like a huge Mr. Bungle nut. I
Okay.
saw their first tour, them at Dallas City Limits, and their first tour. There's like 10 people in the audience.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, it's that stuff is great in itself, but I mean, it's just like Speaking of which,
Hmm.
it's funny. I
Yeah.
you know I made a sandwich before I ate, and I was gonna eat it while we were talking, but I just forgot about it. But I was like, I should do the Mike Patton thing, of eating a sandwich while I was during. Have you seen that video where
Oh
he?
no, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, he does his interview like in 1991 or 90 or something, and he's like eating this lady's interviewing him for maybe MTV or something. He's eating a sandwich while he's doing it. It's kind of funny, but yeah, I just did the grunge thing didn't take off for me, but yeah, then like so I was into like general prog in the early 90s, just exploring all that stuff, just like going to Forever Young, looking at their clearance bin is what really got me into
Okay.
deeper stuff, because they had like this $2 clearance vinyl bin, and
Uh-huh.
they would accidentally put some stuff, like I would take a stack of things to that guy Philip and be like, he was like, hey, what'd you
Yeah.
find today? And I'm like, oh, I found this band Matching Mole, and I noticed it has Robert Wyatt from Soft Machine. He was like, oh, I put that was in there. I put, because he was the one who stocks that stuff. So I
Uh-huh.
was always like, he was always just like, "Oh shit," maybe I should put that one in there, But
That's
yeah,
funny.
I mean, it's just
Yeah.
like getting all kinds of obscure, as obscure as I could, without the internet. And then in the mid
Right.
'90s is when I started got together with some older guys and started kind of being trying to be in a prog band.
Mhm.
They turned me, and they were a few years older than me, and that's when like '94 or so, this guy turned me on to Magma, and I was just like, he
Okay.
played Udu Udu or De Futura, and of course
Yeah.
that was just like, oh my God, what is this shit? This is amazing. So I got real big into Magma, and then at
Yeah.
the same time, he and this group of guys, we kind of all discovered, the Zool, the RIO stuff, so we got into like Thinking Plague and um,
Mhm.
Universe Zero. That's what we were trying to make our
Mhm.
band like is kind of like a mixture, like an RIO wannabe band.
Okay. That's a
Um,
sort of subgenre that I think I tried out earlier than I should have. Because the stuff that I heard, I guess when I was like maybe 18 or 19, I was like, well, that's okay, but overall, nope, not for me. And it was
it's a
until
tough
like maybe
listen,
15 years later that I'm like, okay, I'm ready now. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know whether for me it was like that it was like kind of these older guys like saying like, "Hey, check this out," and I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm 5 or 6 years younger than you guys, so I don't want to be uncool." I mean, I liked it, but I mean, it's at the
Yeah.
same time, maybe if I would have had a different reaction if I somebody else my age or I don't know showed me
Mhm.
the stuff. But yeah, I was just like, that's Shub Niggurath, got into that, and
Yeah.
just Artzoid, that all that stuff, just so
Uh-huh.
as much as I could in the '90s, with the very early one of these guys that I mentioned, he was on the early internet, and so there's
Mhm.
some maybe a couple prog message boards, and so he was finding out about stuff, and then getting stuff imported, from a local
Mhm.
record store. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's generally it for me. I then I kind of like went a different direction, and where with my music, where kind of like similar to late '70s prog bands. I was trying to like, well, my natural tendency was to kind of like try to make more poppy music, but infuse prog elements into it. So
Mhm.
here we are. I guess we have a minute left. I don't
Yeah.
have the premium version of Zoom, so we're running out of
Oh,
time.
okay.
I'm sorry if I dominated this last part, but yeah,
Oh, no
anything
worries.
last words?
Well, I think one of the things that you talked about, maybe we could get into more, is and this is an interesting topic for me because of how when I grew up, alternatives music's effects on getting into prog, and
Mm,
because what was big for me was that I didn't like alternative rock overall. I mean, some of the grunge bands at first I was fine with, but then you start getting by like 1994, you get into sort of like post grunge alternative bands, I
yeah.
guess you could say. Stuff like it's a little easier going, like Everclear. I'll pick on Everclear for now, and I'm just like, I don't like this at all. And like everybody around me is just so into it, and if
Yeah.
they're not into it, they're either into rap or country,
Yeah,
and I'm
let's
just
do
like,
it. Let's talk. Let's make that the next thing. I think we're about to get
yeah.
shut off here, but
Oh, okay.
totally, yeah. That's a good one. Let's do that. Talk about that next time. Hey,
Okay,
good,
sounds
good
good to
talking to
me.
you, man.
Good
Next
talking to you as
time.
well.
See ya.
All right. Bye bye.